Hello, my friends. My name is Gerdes. I'm just a professor trying to offer context and understanding about what's going on in the war in Ukraine. Today is Tuesday, May 7th. So today, Putin was re-inaugurated. I'm not sure that that's a word. He was inaugurated for, I think, his fifth term. And that's the big story. But there's a story behind the story, and then there's a story that follows the story. And those are the stories that we're going to look at in our three big stories. Okay, so I've talked about this a number of times. This is an old article, but Putin spent 1 billion euro on being re-elected, which seems on its face patently absurd. Everybody knew he was going to win. He could have won without spending a fraction of that. He didn't mind spending that $1 billion. He spent $1 billion to win a rigged election. Now, there's a reason why, because he wanted to have a record number to somehow show that he was that awesome, that dreamy. And so a record number of votes and a record of number of turnout with that vote. It wasn't enough just to have, 80-something% voting for him. No, you had to have a huge proportion of the population so that he could claim a mandate. And that's essentially what he got. But dictators fail to understand that when you have a disproportionately high number voting for you, it doesn't look like you're awesome, it looks more rigged. So in a normal election in the rest of the world where there is democracy, if it's 60-40, that's a blowout, right? When you get into the 80s, it's Banana Republic. Okay, let's look at this. So Radio Liberty published this list of EU countries whose representatives will attend Putin's inauguration today. These are, and a couple of these surprised me, like France. Hungary, that was no surprise. Slovakia, not much of a surprise. Greece, Malta, Cyprus, okay, but Belgium was going to go, but they decided to change their minds. Now that's the right move, and that's the right move because if they go to this inauguration, it's like putting their stamp of approval on, yes, this was a real election, when it probably was pretty significantly rigged, and not even just significantly rigged, like the whole system was in on it. Okay, Putin's inaugurated for the fifth time as Russia's president. Let's skip down here to these two paragraphs. This year stands out, as a number of Western nations and the EU chose to boycott this event. Their governments claim that this year's presidential election in Russia, which Putin won with a record 87.28% of the vote, was not free and fair. Again, this is in RT, so they're going over it. And he won with this record vote. That doesn't mean he's awesome. That means that he's Banana Republic. Okay, Russia's relations with the West are at one of their worst points in history. Moscow has accused the U.S. and its allies of waging a proxy war against Russia, which is bad. Not like waging a real war against Ukraine, which is, okay, special military operation. Shame on me for saying that, at least for now. So we couldn't say special. Now here's an interesting point. We couldn't say war. We had to say special military operation. But Putin's now re-elected officially. I wonder how long that'll take before you can start using the war word, or the W word. Okay, here's another article in Reuters about what was going on here. Just a few paragraphs again. Putin told Russia's political elite after being sworn in that he was not rejecting dialogue with the West, including on nuclear weapons. Of course, he's nuclear saber-rattling, and he nuclear saber-rattles all the time in order to get his way, but he can't really use them because to use them would be to invite disaster, but he can threaten it. The choice is theirs. Do they intend to continue trying to restrain the development of Russia? Yeah, that's what we want to do. Continue the policy of aggression, incessant pressure on our country for years, or look to a path of cooperation and peace. But see, you only get cooperation and peace when you're cooperative and peaceful, not when you're the bull in the china shop destroying the international order. So it's a really funny thing for him to say, do they intend to continue to do these things, when he's kind of doing these things. Ukraine says peace can only come with a full withdrawal of Russian troops, who control nearly 20% of its territory, as they control a large fraction in Moldova and a large fraction in Georgia. Okay, next. So the Russian government has resigned at the conclusion of the inauguration ceremony of the Russian president. What happened? The current cabinet will work in an acting status until a new set of ministers is appointed. The powers of the presidential administration are automatically terminated as well. Okay, so did they all resign in protest? No, this is a constitutional thing. This is what happens. Here it is in RT, and they're explaining it, but their explanation is just the most amazing explanation I've ever seen. So constitutionally, the cabinet is done at the end of the term. That makes sense. And then he has to reappoint a new cabinet. So they're all jockeying for position, trying to figure out who's going to get what plum jobs. The Russian prime minister and the cabinet resigned on Tuesday, as required by law when a new president is sworn in. Okay, that makes sense. I mean, we do the same thing. When a new president comes in, he brings in his cabinet and that sort of thing as well. So there's nothing really new there. Vladimir Putin has taken the presidential oath, officially beginning his 5th term in office. Okay, on Monday, Putin met with the entire cabinet to thank them for their work and sum up their accomplishments. The Russian government has achieved significant results in most areas, the president said. Okay, well, let's say. The upcoming 18th cabinet of the post-Soviet Russia is to be formed a bit differently from the previous one. A 2020 constitutional reform empowers the parliament to confirm every minister nominated by the executive branch, as opposed to approving only the prime minister. Now, I thought that was interesting because I did my dissertation on the American constitutional system as it was being created. And I thought, wow, another check and balance. That's pretty interesting that they would do that. And then I read the next line. The next line says, the law allows several weeks for the process, which can end in a snap parliamentary election should the lawmakers repeatedly reject candidates for prime minister. In practice, the traditions have been smooth since the constitutional crisis of 1998. So, yes, they can approve all these members, but they can also call for an election to get rid of the bums that are, not approving the guys that he wants if they don't approve the guys that he wants. So it'll be a pretty smooth process. It'll be nothing like the U.S. Speaker of the House contests. This time, this election of the new government is expected to be swift. I'll bet you it'll be swift. Okay, last little bit. This is the third big story. There was a strike. Explosions in Luhansk is reported. This was just a few hours ago now. Now the area is on fire, 110 kilometers from the front line. It's an oil depot on fire in the Luhansk after strikes. Missile debris in Luhansk, presumably ATACMS. I don't know enough to be able to see that and tell you if it is or not. ATACMS missile debris in Luhansk, plus additional video on fire of the oil depot. And I've seen this on multiple channels now. So it's a big story, not because of this particular oil depot, but because the hits keep coming on oil depots and refineries and things like that. The more that happens, the more difficult it's going to be for Russia to continue to fund itself, because they're heavily dependent on oil and gas as a major component of their budget. So keep looking for those. Every one of those is a step closer to peace. Okay, last little bit. Saw this and I thought, this is funny. What's going on? This is actually Marjorie Taylor Greene putting this up on her own, outside of her office. Digitally manipulated media. You see what they're doing to me? They're making this stuff up. Like, that's kind of the message that but she's putting it up. Like, she's making this a story that doesn't need to be a story, but she's doing that. Well, why is she doing that? Well, if you go up here, she's saying no more money for Ukraine. I mean, she's physically saying no more money for Ukraine. And you're not going to hear that. It's a little bit too low. No more money for Ukraine. So, in essence, even if it is digitally manipulated media, the point still stands. All right. That's all that I have. Thank you for your likes. Thank you for the subscribes. Special thanks to all of you who have joined me on Patreon, even as free members. Although I'm very grateful for those of you who have come out and joined me as a colleague or as a board member. But I also want to say thank you just for joining, because this is my backup plan in case something goes wrong with YouTube. Thank you for your time. Thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.